Welcome. Good morning. Good morning. It's Dr. Vibe here, host and producer of the award-winning Dr. Vibe show, the home of Epic Conversations. And I'm the host of Epic Conversations, 2020 Best Podcast News Award winner, 2018 Innovation Award winner, given out by the Canadian Ethnic Media Association. And I also co-host and co-produce the only online show in the world for dads and fathers. It's sponsored by Dove Men Plus Care. And being part of that collaboration, last year reached out directly and indirectly to over 100,000 fathers around the world. And as always, I'd like to say you're blessed, highly favored, a magnet for miracles, and a solution for someone's problem. And it is the Morning Vibe on October 3rd, a chilly October 3rd, as we say in Toronto, as I was sharing with one of our friends. It's going to be joining us in a moment. Yeah, winter is in the air. Winter is in the air. So, next week in Canada, it's actually, no, this weekend coming, it's Thanksgiving. And like, where did September go? Like, my goodness, it's just like flash, 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 go, go, go. My goodness. Like, I don't know. I don't know. I can't, because I'm getting old, time is flying by. I don't know. But as they say, age ain't nothing but a number, and looking forward to another great conversation this morning on the Morning Vibe. Now, for those who are usually with us, Ryan Knight is usually with us, but he is not with us today. He is not feeling well. So let's speak that Ryan will be back with us on Friday, but let's get to some important stuff. Let's get down to some business first. This episode of the Morning Vibe is brought to you by the McMillan Group. And the McMillan Group has been providing mortgage solutions since one client at a time, since 1999, buying, refinancing, or investing. Call them at 905-813-4354 in Canada. In the US, 904-586-5636. So always want to thank their continuous support of the Morning Vibe. And I'll just put it out there. Hey, if you want to promote your business or service on the Morning Vibe, give us a holler. Now I woke up hungry this morning. And I guess the reason why I woke up hungry because we have our monthly segment with our two wonderful friends from Foodpreneur Lab. Janice and Marie are with us this morning. Good morning, ladies.
Good morning.
How are things?
Happy Monday. That's all I gotta say. Happy Monday.
and now this is a thing. It's interesting. You see a lot of orange. That was not done on purpose this morning. Like no. Janice is wearing orange, Marie's wearing orange, and our names are in orange. And you see the lower third down there scrolling is orange.
Orange. Yes.
Le Grand Orange. How was everyone's weekend?
Well, very well.
Busy. Very busy.
Yeah, tell us what you did on Saturday.
So my partner and I own a catering company, and we did our last wedding ever. And it was amazing.
Don't say ever. You never.
I know.
Never.
I know. I'm regretting saying that out loud now, but it was just very interesting because it was very reminiscent of how we started our business. Very long story short, we ended up having to handpick all of our staff, which is something I did not like doing in the very beginning. And that's how we ended things. But it was great. Everyone came together. The client was happy. I'm exhausted, but like a happy exhausted.
Congrats.
Or
Congrats.
a good tired.
A good tired. Yes.
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 Congrats.
Janice, what was your weekend like?
I actually went to see a play over the weekend called yes, I dabble in the arts
Culture.
every now and then, get culture. So I went to go see a play at Soul Pepper Theater because I'm a huge fan of them. Very small and intimate. It was called Bad Parent. It was the debuting of it. It was very good. But I want to throw a shout out for anybody who likes to go to plays like myself. The Kink in My Hair is back in December.
Yes.
Trey Anthony, if you get a chance to go see it, it's at the Blue Pale Theater. I am already looking at tickets. I saw it, oh my God, maybe it was a decade ago when they first launched it. And then CBC picked it up. Similarly, when I went to see Kim's Convenience, I saw the first show at Soul Pepper Theater.
Come on.
Listen, Soul Pepper Theater is one of the greatest places to go and see some plays that come to mainstream market at some point. So just FYI. So that was my thing.
What? Based on that, I'm going to reach out to them to have them on the show.
Yes, it was good. So I took my sister and I just did something different. That's something I like to dabble in every now and again. Thanks to my mother. Growing up, she always sent us to plays, so that's part of my cultural experience. Yes, Louise Bennett, Randy Williams.
Yes.
Oh yes. Oliver. That's what and the ballet with Rex Nettleford.
Of course.
Yes, so I thank her.
Professor Rex.
Professor Rex. Professor Rex. So I am eternally grateful for my mother exposing me to all that. So
this is where your love of Stratford comes from, I'm sure.
Yes.
That's culture. All right, culture. Okay, well. We're not here to, we're talking about another part of culture.
Yes.
Food. But today we're talking about something that I'm hearing more and more about food preservation. And yes. I want to enter our conversation today out based on a conversation I had about 2 months ago. The family that lives next door to me, the husband has been, if you're in Toronto, you know anything about the Danforth, there's been an IGA that's been on the Danforth for years. Mm-hmm. I think it's called something different now, but it's still an IGA. And we were talking across from patio to patio, and we got on the conversation about, I asked him, so what happens to the food that you don't sell? And it was interesting. He said there was a time they used to be able to give it away to charities and agencies, but because now of legalities, because if anyone got sick from it, they just throw it out.
Sad but true.
I don't know if it has directly to do with this conversation, but that was when Marie listed one of these topics. That was one of the things that came to my alleged mind about preserving food.
Yeah. Well, it's funny you should say that because when you look at our food waste, which is a little bit off topic, but the fact that you hit on that, we have 58% of food wastage in Canada, which costs us $49 billion. And
hold on. I need how much?
58% of food waste, which costs us $49 billion to get rid of. And when I mean get rid of, which is put it in a truck and drive it across the border to get rid of it. That's just food. That doesn't include any other waste products that we produce. And so it's a significant problem, but guess what? That's a whole other show.
Yeah. So Marie, add that to your great topics that you.
I mean, it definitely is related, right? I mean, one of the reasons why food preservation is so important is to extend that longevity of the food. So it does have the effect of also reducing waste if done properly, especially with things like canning. Not so much, refrigeration will extend it a little bit as well, but things that allow your food to become more shelf stable so that you can kind of go through the winters and that, which is kind of how we do it here in Canada. But that's super important for that. And then the other piece, of course, is killing pathogens, which I think is something that's a bit more related to the Caribbean and African experience as well with regards to cooking and food preparation.
Okay, well, I know we went off topic a little bit. We'll get back, but from LinkedIn, food waste is definitely part of the conversation. We will get to that in an upcoming conversation. So thank you for someone else recognizing that. But let's talk about food preservation. You know, I'm just the audience. You guys are driving the ship. I'm going to steer the ship. Who wants to start off?
I mean, I can start off by just sort of saying that when we talk about food preservation, we're really talking about one of the many food ways, right? So food ways are kind of like that intersection of, culture, tradition, history, all kind of mixing together, and how they manifest themselves in the way we produce food and we eat food. So when we think about how we eat food here in Canada, we're about to go into sort of like that harvest, that Thanksgiving time frame that's happening next weekend. In the States, a little bit later in the season. But this is really traditionally where farmers would go, and they would, pick up all the rest of the harvest and, put it in cellars or refrigerate it or pickle it or can it or do whatever additional process to it in order to keep it going for the long winter. So that's kind of why I wanted to talk about this particular topic and sort of reach into our memories and think about ways in which the food we grew up with has maybe gone through this process without us even thinking about it. So I know the first episode we talked a little bit about bully beef.
That's right.
Which
corned beef.
Corned beef.
Corned beef,
whatever,
and
whatever
key, and your corn and your bully beef,
and the key,
right? So I mean, that's a canned product. That is a food preservation method. It has been salted, corned, processed, canned. That thing's gonna last forever. It's gonna outlive all of us on this call, right? So that's a perfect example of a product that is readily available, that has made its way into our food cultures, likely by way of wanting to find remedies around foods that don't go bad so quickly.
And the cost as well. There's a practicality of the cost, because when you factor food preservation, there's always a cost associated with it. And so to Marie's great intro, one of the things I wanted to preface is that if you look at where we are in food preservation, and then we step back and look in history, the reality of it is it was a very practical way to store food to ensure you could feed your family. If we're going to look at it from that sense, from the farmer's lens, which was, you have all this harvest, okay, what are we going to do now, and how do we get through these winter months? And so that it was a form of necessity. It wasn't, oh, let's can, that would be, it wasn't an activity to do per se. It was a necessity. And so if you go back, remember, refrigeration only happened in 1857. So when you look at it from that lens and the Industrial Revolution, we're saying, okay, well, how did we store food? We used to dig holes underground and store foods using wood and straw and ice. And that's how we kept the food cool. Now, Marie said something important very early about pathogens, which are forms of microorganisms that are created in food that can kill, and they're extremely toxic. But there's a science in everything that we eat, and food preservation is no different. So there's an acronym called FATTOM, FATTOM. And FATTOM really are the 6 characteristics in food, which is F for the type of food, A for the acidity in the food, T for time, T for temperature, oxygen, and moisture. The ones that you always have to monitor in the food are all 6. There's no, oh, we don't have to pay attention to oxygen. Well, yeah, oxygen is introduced in food, makes food go bad quickly. Oh, we don't have to pay enough temperature. We don't have to pay enough attention to time. Well, if you undercook things, that's what causes bacteria and pathogens. And if you don't heat foods properly, that's what creates food poisoning. Oh, we don't have to pay any attention to moisture. Well, actually, moisture is the enemy of preservation. So food preservation, so you can't, all 6 have to live in and work together. So when we say food preservation, to Marie's point, we have to pay attention to those 6 characteristics so that we can safely store food and that we can still pull the nutrients from them when they're out of season. Because when you look at some of the stuff that we're preserving as well, they tend to be out of season. Most, not all, but most, so that we can have our canned peaches or jarred peaches, or dried apricots, mangoes, stuff that you wouldn't find seasonally. So I just wanted to preface that before we start getting into a deeper dive, because the pH levels in food is integral to the safety of food as well and how we preserve foods. So over to you, Marie.
No, well, I just want to interrupt if I can.
Yes.
Politely. Aldofina saying true, and for accessibility in the diaspora, when we move away from the tropics, it's a necessity to rely on more processing to store and transport our foods.
Absolutely.
And going back to some of the historic stuff that Janice mentioned as well, if we look at the indigenous cultures that existed on the Caribbean islands before Africans were brought over, so the Taino people, the Arawak people,
the Axumaicans.
Yeah, yes. They also used to use clay pots as sort of, I guess, a form of early refrigeration, right? A nice cool area that was dry that they could, again, put in dirt, or that they could put in a cool area that would keep things nice and cool. So that was sort of our first crack at refrigeration before refrigeration became a thing.
Yeah, and clay pots was a thing a couple of years ago. I don't know if you remember that, Marie, where everybody was cooking and digging a hole, putting it in the ground, seasoning, and then coming like, oh, look at what we've created. Clay pots have been around longer than we've existed. So
Dr. Vibes looking at us like, where are you guys hanging out that you're clay pot?
No, I remember these things, and maybe I'm advancing too far ahead in the conversation, but how prevalent is food preservation in Black culture from both of your lens these days? Because I know a number of people that do food preservation, but they don't look like me.
Right. So I'm going to just quickly jump in, and because Marie has probably a longer history and awareness, but the number one thing that we do, that hot pepper that we like to put on our fish with the onions, that's food preservation. The currants that we soak in rum for the Christmas cake, that's food preservation.
Okay.
So it can come in
the chicken that you might be soaking in lime juice in the sink.
Yes.
That's food preservation.
So it comes in a variety of forms. In your mind, I hear you, Dr. Vibe, is the canning of peaches, the jarring of apricots or traditional fruits, or apples and blueberries. That's very North American. But if you bring it back into the diaspora, as I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I don't want to butcher her name, but to the lady that made the comment earlier, we tend to do foods that culturally or tropically we can't have here, and so we will use that to extend the longevity. But traditionally, we tend to use it, that pepper brine with the onions and the Scotch bonnet pepper that we like to kind of pour, what's the word I'm looking for? In vast amounts on our fried fish. Yes, that's the first one that comes to mind.
And this is why I say that this is part of Foodways, because there's a long history of doing certain things out of necessity. And now we do them as sort of like an intricate part, like it's just an integral part of our food culture that we don't even consider to be part of that process, but it's derived from that process. So all of those examples that Janice just gave, those are perfect examples. There's a reason why there's tons of vinegars and lime juice and lemon that's in all facets of Caribbean cooking, right? Whether it's from the pre-cooking process, marinating your fish and your meat and your things like that. All these things are meant to, again, kill pathogens and extend the longevity of that food item in a safe way. It also adds flavor. That's the consequence of all of that. And those flavors then become part of the food culture as well. So again, that flavoring of that vinegar and that lime that's sort of prevalent here and there. I know in Haitian cooking, it's huge. Even today, a lot of areas in Haiti, we don't have consistent refrigeration or don't have consistent access to electricity. So there's a lot of rolling blackouts, which essentially means you just don't have electricity every single day between the hours of, let's say, 4 o'clock in the morning and 6 o'clock at night. So you can't really rely on refrigeration as a great way to kind of keep your food fresh or to keep it safe. You have to rely on other methods in order to do that. So we do a lot of pickling, and we do a lot of salt and vinegar brines as well in order to preserve meats and vegetables.
Is this a subject that's becoming more and more relevant because of the pandemic?
I don't think so. I haven't seen anything that's indicated that this is. If anything, it's created. If there's an increase due to the pandemic, it's probably created it in terms of an activity or in terms of, I would say, food costs, keeping food costs down. But I think that was already in existence. I don't know, Marie. I haven't seen a spike per se, but I mean, I know people are being more practical.
It is related, but I was going to say, like, fermentation is one of the processes of preservation, and fermentation is a huge part of even like how we make sourdough breads and how we treat yeast. And I know that like there was that bread spike, right, during the pandemic where everyone was making everything. So I can see where people wanting to sort of go back to that homesteading or learning a little bit more grassroots. A pandemic will create that scarcity, and scarcity is one of the solutions that is that comes from understanding how to preserve your food or how to make your food. So I could see it being related. I don't know anyone who like learned how to pickle during the pandemic, which is why I hesitate. I am agreeing with Janice, and I hesitate saying like there's a direct relation, but I can see how it's part of an ecosystem of skill sets that people were very eager to learn how to do.
Yeah, and sustain, because once, I mean, if you look at it, we were all told to stay indoors. So of course, I would say there's a spike. But then after we were cleared to go back outside, how many people continued that activity, right? So that for me, that would be the measure.
Okay. Good stuff. Adolfina, I hope I get your name right. If I don't, it's my
thank you.
It's my head, not my heart. She says yes, and more naturally with our spices and dried herbs.
Yes, very, very much so. So one of the things we talk about is, you know, I have an example here of a sun-dried tomato, and that's what that looks like. And this one in particular is Mediterranean sun-dried. So it's interesting. For those of us who aren't in the culinary sector per se, I mean, the odds of you using a sun-dried tomato in Jamaican culture are very slim, because we like our fresh tomatoes. But if you go outside that, I mean, this thing it's quite tasty. You tend to see it on pizzas. You know, it's and Marie, feel free to jump in. It's quite the staple item in the culinary world, you know, mm-hmm. Sun-dried tomatoes. And so, you know, this is just another example of this is sun-dried. Then you have a dehydrated version. So it all depends on how you go about using food preservation and the different types to create, you know, different forms of food that get extended, that can be used or beyond its seasonality, which is part of the whole idea of doing that.
Drying is huge, right? And I know, and of course, this doesn't work in a commercial setting at all, but it's not unlike for certain for cultures to put meats or certain foods on the roof to dry, right? Like literally just like a solar drying. You know, we're talking about how you do it commercially, you do it safely in kind of a context, but there's also ways in which individuals will do preservation that doesn't seem like it's part of that process or that system, but it really truly is.
So you're talking about commercial, because is this a practice that a lot of commercial food people do? Like, again, I don't know. So I'm just asking questions as a person who doesn't know this. Right. So I like, because I come from the context of the home person. But what about the commercial food person?
So, oh, Marie, go ahead.
No, I mean, I was going to say, like, there's of course there's canned products. We already talked, like, there's products that you purchase that are preserved, and the idea, whether it's like, there you go, sun-dried tomatoes, or like something, it's an oil, right? If you go to the grocery store and you purchase olives in a brine or in an oil or a pickling juice, those have all been preserved. And anything that's shelf stable. So if you see a fruit or a vegetable that's out of the refrigerator that's sitting there on the grocery shelf, it's gone through some, or a meat, for example, it's gone through some level of preservation in order to get it in that state so that it can be shelf stable, right? So that's anything from like tuna in a can to, we've just talked about the sun-dried tomatoes and whatnot. But at the commercial level, there is, refrigeration is considered preservation as well, right? Anytime you are extending that longevity of a product in order to process it, you are participating in that process,
in the chemical reaction of that process. And so for the commercial side, it's higher volume, maybe more additives that help the preservation of the food product itself. So for example, I'm sorry, I have all this food here because I'm going to have a snack. So this is, for those of you who don't know, this is a form of prosciutto, and this is cured. And so similar to corned beef, salt's added to the meat and it's dried out. It's a process. But and that's me explaining it in its simplicity from a domestic lens, from a, in your home kitchen lens. But when you start looking at this commercially, then a lot more goes into that, right? And so you'll find more cured meats. And if you notice how thin it is, because, again, it's been dried out. I mean, it has a lot of flavor, very little moisture to it. But again, these are the things that you have to look at. So if you're going to be doing food preservation from home on a smaller scale, you can have a canning machine, a canning pot, a dehydrator, you can add vinegar. There are a variety of things, but when you start talking about commercial, it's a little bit more an industrial approach to it.
Good stuff. Well, just doing a little reset here on the Morning Vibe today. We're with Janice and Marie from Foodpreneur Lab talking about food preservation. And of course, our members of our family are chiming in, help making an epic conversation. Tim says we use industrial vacuum sealers for food in our hotels and large franchises as a form of preservation. There's a residential vacuum food sealers, and I'm a huge advocate for food sealers at home.
That's right. We've been talking about fridges as sort of like this this additional mechanism that will create that longevity. But there's also ways like vacuum sealers, even like a Ziploc bag, tin foil. Like these are all tools that are used either commercially or at the residential level so that we can preserve our foods, right? Even putting your food in Tupperware. Like we do it every day. We just don't even really think about it.
Yeah.
Got it.
The food vacuum. I have a food vacuum underneath my sink that has not seen the light of day, and I'm looking at the rolls that go with it because I at some point I used to use it. I don't want to
discontinued.
Exactly. The machine's probably discontinued, and it was a really good vacuum sealer. But to Tim's point, yes, exactly. And not only that, it goes back to Adolfina's point as we were talking earlier about the food waste. This is our contribution to minimize that food waste. So for example, I have a rule as a single person, I will not shop at Costco because I think I take a stand on that because I am buying more food than one person can consume. And so you really there's a consciousness level that is required if you're conscious about the volume and tons of food waste, the impact that it is having, and those people who can't afford to have proper meals, what's your contribution? So I will not go to Costco and buy a 12-pack of bread or double. No, I won't do it. And me putting it in a freezer with the intention of going to go back to it in 6 months, then my argument is, Well, not why not just buy one that has 12 in it, so you don't have to. So you really have to start paying attention
Mm.
to the food waste. And also I had to adopt a certain behavior, which was traditionally you go to grocery store every Friday. I now break that down to every 3 days because I was throwing out food. The other thing is the food doesn't last as long as well. So yeah,
Okay,
yeah,
I just want to get to that point now.
yeah.
Just before we go further, Tim says yes, flash freezing is also a form of preservation
Mhm.
commercially.
Yes.
And then Hayton had a question saying, does preserved foods lose vitamins or minerals or any other benefits?
Actually, depending on how of the method of preservation, they tend to hold their nutrients, but like any food over time, it will diminish the longer it sits on the shelf or in storage. So, for example, I think we were saying tomatoes, for example, can be preserved for 18 months. Vegetables and meats, 2 to 5 years, which is great. But yeah, you're going to lose some nutrient value as with anything. But at least you still have access to the food and some nutrients.
And in some
Fresh
cases,
is
you're actually
always
going to get,
best.
yeah, you're going to get long, you can get longer nutrient value as would than if it was fresh and you were waiting until the very last minute to eat it.
Yeah.
Right. So if your bag of broccoli is only good for a week, day 6, it's not going to be as nutrient as, let's say, you flash froze it the first day you got it.
Aldofina says, I can only buy things in Costco if I can carry them out without using a cart.
There you go. There you go.
I think just by some of the things you've just recently shared, I think maybe we should do a segment on how should you shop at the grocery store?
Oh, that's like a whole other thing.
Well, first rule on a full stomach.
It's true.
I can't
But-
emphasize that, on a full stomach.
No, but I think we need, I just said just a suggestion of just shopping at the grocery store, because both because you're in the business, there's a whole marketing side that people have who have a grocery store.
Yes.
And a
Yes.
lot of times it's to tourists from buying their best stuff.
I'll add it on my list. How's that? Shopping on
There we
grocery
go.
stores.
There
Yeah.
we go.
We'll make it
So-
happen. We'll make it happen.
So let's get back to the food preservation.
But
Marie, you seem to be the expert on this one, so we're letting you drive the ship today.
It's funny. Okay, so I'm actually going to go back to the Costco comment because I think it's important to talk about this because it does lead into how the community shops and how we eat and how this all kind of goes full circle, right? Because none of these topics are in a vacuum. We've touched a couple of them. My family, so it's my mom, my dad, and me. And growing up, my uncle and my grandmother, we all lived together. Okay, so we were 5 in a house. Most of them were adults except for me, and my parents used to shop at Costco. My parents are now seniors. They live alone with each other, just 2 of them. They still shop at Costco. We joke that there's more food in their fridge today than there was growing up, and there are less people. And of course, they're seniors. They're just not eating at the same rate. But I recognize that the need to purchase an abundance of food and the need to have an abundance of food around you is a trauma response to food scarcity. So if you grew up in a setting where food wasn't readily available, so and that might be some of us in the diaspora, that might be people who are in low income, whatever reason it might be, if you grew up with not a lot of food around you, then you're going to gravitate towards purchases that sort of remedy that feeling of like, okay, we have enough. And food preservation's part of that equation as well. So you could be buying in abundance, right? And it's kind of like that whole analogy of that squirrel sort of putting away their nuts. Yeah, winter. And that's kind of where food preservation can help with that anxiety that comes with, where am I going to get my next meal? How are we going to make it through that big winter? And again, these are kind of like North American feelings that are being added on to the anxiety that might be coming from the diaspora. But when you come here, I think that need to be surrounded with safety, it doesn't change. It just turns into something a little bit different to, go with the weather that we're also dealing with as well. Because as well as I do, your garden is not going to grow outside in the wintertime.
Right.
Right.
It's interesting. It's interesting. I'm thinking about maybe many of us humans should learn from the animal kingdom. how they do their food preservation. I'm thinking about the squirrels that store the nuts and things like that. I don't, maybe it's a crazy idea, but it just came up in my head how the members of the animal kingdom do their food preservation.
Same thing. They dig holes, they stick food in there. They you know.
I'm not going to fight another lioness for a piece of food. That's all I'm about to tell you. But I do hear what you're saying. You're just missing the other half of the equation. Okay? I just want to put that out there. Interesting point that Marie made about surplus. And in North America, I can't speak for other countries, but North America, we have a penchant of buying more than we need. And so, for example, growing up in the West Indies, or let me say within the diaspora, how many countries have storage facilities? I think that is just the best example I could look at, because in North America, storage facilities thrive on what? Excess crap that we have, that we've purchased, that we're not using,
or a basement, just like a random room that's not being used for anything specifically.
And it's interesting because we easily adapt to that culture, right? We get pulled in, to Marie's point, because it's a form of security. For some, it's food. For others, it's clothes, it's cars, whatever it is. So I just wanted to point that out as I'm going through the process of purging myself. So, yeah, exactly.
Janice and I both have a bit of a shoe problem. It's not a
bed out there.
Okay.
Yep, I'm gonna own that.
If I don't say it, my husband's gonna watch this later and be like, "Girl, how are you gonna throw Janice under the bus like that?" Like, no, we are both under the bus.
We're kindred spirits in the shoe department.
Roger says best to buy a bread maker.
Yeah, you know what? To a point, if you like making bread, that's not my cup. Well, yeah, it's not my cup of tea. But to Roger's point, yes, that is a way as well. And it's so interesting because for North American, we will preserve. For the Black culture, we'll hold on to grains and flour, stuff we can make instantly. That you make the dumpling, you pull out the corned beef, the bully beef, and you're good to go. Okay. The tuna ackee and salt fish, which is cured as well in salt. We just have stuff that necessarily is not dependent upon refrigeration, but are still stapled items and forms of food preservation as well.
That's why we have so many porridges, right? Porridges.
Rice porridge.
Because again,
porridge,
these
banana porridge.
Exactly. Just like you just said, these are all dried goods that it's like add an item to kind of activate it and make it go.
And to Marie's point, I'll preface it by, if you look at our history of slavery, we did not have spices to, let me just juju this piece of bone, oxtail bone that they're going to give me to eat. Remember, we had ends. We didn't have prime cuts of meat. We didn't have sirloin, AAA, Chateaubriand. We didn't have that. We had ends. And God love us for our tenacity and our ability to create more from that. So if you look at food preservation from our culture, our history, it absolutely makes sense because they used what they had access to. Mm-hmm. Bottom line, they weren't spoiled for choice.
Nice. I love it. Aldofina, and I want to make sure I get your name right. If not, again, it's my head, not my heart if I don't get it right. She says, growing up in Sierra Leone during the Civil War, we had to learn to love the cellular cold room. Migrating here after that experience was such a culture shock. It was a bit disturbing to see the wasteful and excessive food culture of North America.
I think going back to what Janice was saying earlier, part of the problem, and we can of course talk about this in our shopping, our grocery shopping episode as well, but it's this idea that we want to have strawberries in the middle of February. We want to have what we want when we want it. And so that's a big difference between, how things are in the diaspora, as well as how things are, again, in low income sort of situations. That choice requires us to have a completely different relationship with our food system. So food preservation is a bit more of a sustainable way. You can actually pickle strawberries. I'm just letting you guys know it's a thing. It's very tasty. But this is a way for us to be able to have those fruits and vegetables at different times of the year without being wasteful. So if we were to get a little bit more serious about food preservation or pickling or jarring or canning, we could help solve some of those waste problems that we currently have.
Absolutely. I think we're going to be forced to deal with that sooner than later, because the landfills are quickly at capacity. A lot of the new landfills, I think there was an issue. Is it in Waterloo? I think it's Waterloo. I'm not sure. My memory might be deceiving me here, but I think it was in Waterloo region where they're looking to create a landfill. And as usual, not in my backyard. Nobody wants it, but we don't mind contributing to it. And so what we're seeing is the zero waste model that we're seeing in production must be adapted in households. It has to be. Which is, you use the peel. If you're going to peel, the peel is used. You have nothing to put in the garbage. And this is not just, oh, well, we compost. It's bigger than that. It's beyond that. And so I think we have a responsibility. We have to take a responsibility for our contribution. And again, this is why I have such a hard line on this Costco thing. And not just Costco only, even the grocery stores that like to sell the value pack. If you're a family of me, myself, and I, you don't need a value pack, okay? You don't need a value pack. And the truth is, there are probably more single people. I don't know. I haven't looked at the stats, and maybe that's something I should learn. There are probably more single people than there are married. More women are choosing to get married later. Fewer people are cohabitating in the sense of wanting to have children. So even there's a shift in the demographics. So if there's a shift in the demographics, there's a shift in how we're buying. And I think it requires a consciousness on our part, because listen, you don't get to run around saying, oh, we want to make our world environmentally sound and improve. Meanwhile, you're buying a 12 packs of tissue paper and it's just you in your apartment. That doesn't mesh. So I think for us, we really and truly have to look at, how are we purchasing, which is going back to, what is it like for a single person in the grocery store versus a family, and how can we contribute to ensure that we have less waste? And for those who don't know, it's 35 million tons of food waste that we produce in Canada each year. Not combined, each year. And that equates to 95 CN towers, just for a visual. That's how much waste we create.
So for the person that's watching this in their home, whether they're single family, what are some simple ways they can start doing food preservation?
Well, I think Janice just hit it on the head right there. The first thing is to not over purchase. Right? Or making mindful purchases. That's number one. If you are going to purchase something, let's say, we'll give the example of, let's say you're not over purchasing. Let's say you're like a really big fan of like a big fruit or a big vegetable, like a watermelon. Watermelon's a hard vegetable or hard fruit to eat as one person, unless you're buying those little guys. But if you're buying those big melons, like it's a lot of food to eat. So just sort of looking up recipes that allow you to preserve that particular item. So, I've got this fantastic book. If anyone's ever seen the Netflix, I don't know if you can see it there, High on the Hog. There's a Netflix special, but they have a recipe in there for pickled watermelon rinds, which is not something I've ever had, but apparently it's very, very big in Southern United States. And so learning recipes that allow you to kind of use the whole fruit and vegetable, or that, again, create that longevity with that item. And then looking back at looking back at the way we culturally eat food. So again, that salted cod, that smoking, drying, the freezing, the canning, like different ways for us to be able to kind of inject our culture into our food. Because I think a lot of instant foods or easy, readily available foods are not necessarily part of our cultural food. But there are ways to create recipes that are just as delicious and just as easy to prepare that can sort of extend that shelf life of a product if we look into it.
Okay. Adolfina says, yes, supercenter culture is also increasing food waste plus packaging waste. Hayden says, please have mercy on the people who buy in bulk because of financial well-being.
Listen, and to Hayden's point, I absolutely agree, because what tends to happen, the more money you have is the more you spend. But if you one of the things to get to that level of consciousness is that you have to stop and you have to assess what is it that you are doing with a goal in mind. So is the goal to reduce your food cost or reduce your spending habits by 30%? You have to attach a goal and something that's measurable. You can't just wake up one morning and go, okay, you know what, I'm going to buy less food. No. Mm-hmm. It's either you're throwing out so much food and you're now become consciously aware of the food waste, and you decide, okay, you know what, I'm going to change not only my purchasing habits, but my eating habits as well. Maybe the two will go hand in hand, maybe they don't. But it requires a level of consciousness to stop that and saying to ourselves, okay, just because we have more money, we're financially better off, doesn't mean you got to spend every cent of that additional disposable income that you have, right? So maybe it's put somewhere else. It all depends. I mean, I'm not going to lie. I don't have a husband that I got to report to. So
as I put up my ring finger, I'm just like,
Lord, Lord.
I can speak freely and independently because I don't have nobody I got to report to. However, having said that, I am also mindful of the financial discussions that happen between partnerships, okay? And so I'm not being dismissive. I might joke about that, but I'm not being dismissive of that because, that has to be a conversation where you're both on the same page. You just can't wake up one morning and go, okay, honey, I decided we're going to save some money. Here's what we're going to do. You like coffee, right? The coffee grinds we have, we're going to mix it up with some shea butter. And that way you don't have to go and get your facials done anymore. You can just shower,
I'm going to do that before I stop buying shoes though.
Exactly.
Real talk. I'm just saying.
Exactly.
I'm going to rub some coffee grinds on my face before I stop buying shoes.
We're going to have some cost saving tips and all the cost saving tips cut into all the things you like. So this is why I'm saying, I'm not speaking for anybody. You couples got to work it out, but seriously, as long as you're on the same page, just be mindful of that spending and what you're purchasing, to Hayden's point.
It's a good thing this is not dating tips. This is not
Girl, I would be on the
relationship. I'm like, we gotta reset.
What, and with getting back to the main crux of the conversation, with the individuals you help through Foodpreneur Lab, do you make them aware of the importance of this subject?
We very much do. Having said that, one of the things that I always say also is because they are now coming into this sector, that change is not going to get adopted overnight because we are conditioned. We see it every day where you order something from Amazon, the item within the box comes within another box that says Amazon. And so we're conditioned in certain ways. So right now they're consciously aware of eco-friendly packaging. And we're seeing the shift also because the sector is also requiring sustainable packaging as well. It's still in its infancy. And when I mean that, not so much in the terms of the development and the design, the adoption. of having it out there because it costs money. You know, we've shifted from the takeaways from styrofoam are now biodegradable. Great, but they're expensive.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So we're getting there, but it's a slow walk, and it's cost prohibitive. I would say that is one of the biggest contributors. Marie?
And making that link to food preservation, just in case people aren't sort of clicking in how those two things work together, is the vessels that you use in order to jar or package your product at a commercial level will impact that longevity.
Yes.
Right? So if you decide to put your stuff in a box, that's going to be a very different longevity than if you decide to put it in a pouch or a jar or a bag, right? And so one of the things that they go through with package designing is they do talk about sort of like, what is your shelf life today? What would you like your shelf life to be? It's not a conversation in a vacuum. It's also food science, preparation, recipe development, like all of these things are encompassed in that discussion. But that last decision is kind of like, okay, you've got this product. What can you put it in that's going to be attractive to the client, that they're going to want to pick it up? It's going to be easy to use. And also it's going to extend that shelf life and make your product last as long as possible.
Exactly. And that's gases versus no gases. You know, that's part of it as well.
Are the big players in the food industry taking food preservation seriously?
I'm gonna say yes. I honestly I don't know. We're not privy to some of this information.
Right.
So, you know, apart from what they put on the packaging, that's all you know. I mean, I would safely say the Canadian Food Inspection Agency, that is their mandate, and that's what keeps us apprised of what's in your food. So I think they are beholden to the food regulations. So from that lens, I could only answer it from that lens.
Here's what I will say. I think, you know, maybe it's been longer, but I don't remember growing up seeing as many hot bars within grocery stores. And I think that phenomenon of seeing sort of like that prepared food and a sort of a rise of that prepared food actually comes from wanting to have food preservation and longevity of food sort of being at the crux of things. Because at the end of the day, this is all dollars and cents. So I'm going to give an example of, let's say you have deli meats, and those deli meats are all going to go bad within a week, and they're not selling. I mean, arguably you could pull them off the shelf and you could put them in a sandwich and sell them that way. Or you could pull them off the shelf and you could make something with it, right? So all of a sudden the act of heating and recomposing that product will increase its longevity as well. And that's a form of not really like traditional preservation when we're thinking about it. But if the end result is that we're trying to reduce waste and trying to keep food safe and get it consumed, then that is a way that commercially people can do that. So like the Pusateri's, I'm not saying that they do it specifically, but I'm saying like that sort of like canteen hot bar type of situation allows them to do that with their product. I know that when we used to have a micro grocery store, my partner and I, that was one of the things that we would do is we would keep to get a nice rotation of food, but also not to have so much waste within that rotation. You'd be like, okay, we've got peppers, they're starting to bruise a little bit, or we've got some tomatoes, they're starting to go a little bit soft. They're perfect for a sauce. Let's pull them off the shelf and let's make a sauce out of that. Let's can it and then put it back in the fridge as like a homemade sauce. Right. And that's sort of where we can get a little bit smarter, even at home, about how we preserve and sort of maybe even like reinvent our food as well.
Right. Okay. Well, I think that will end off our segment for today. Ladies, another fantastic segment as always. And I gotta big both of you up on something.
What's that?
I'm gonna do something right quick here. And
I'm afraid.
I am too.
No, this is a good thing. I'm just gonna show everybody. Let's bring it up here. Come on. It's the new look of the website.
Oh, the website. Yes.
Thank you.
Love it.
Billy, if you're listening, couldn't have done it without you, girl. Couldn't have done it
Yes.
without you.
Thank you, Philly.
We have a new addition to the team, and she's been instrumental in getting this live streamed on our YouTube going forward, and making sure our website's up and running, and it's been phenomenal.
So just out of curiosity, who is the person featured in the picture here on the front page of the website?
This is Evis from Mandy Pies. So she does Zimbabwe meat pies. So those little pies are in front of her right there. They're like these handheld pies. They're amazing.
What?
I actually have known her since way before the project started. And it just so happened that she was also one of our participants. I was like, girl, that's awesome that you're here. But this is her at Junction Craft Brewery. We did a Juneteenth event earlier this year. And so we had, different members of the diaspora come and showcase their food and sort of celebrate Black joy and excellence. And her beautiful smile and wonderful products just needed to be showcased on that front page.
Yeah, I pulled up and go, got a surprise, Janice. And we say, I'm liking this beautiful picture. Really nice front of the website. Very nice. Now, folks, if you want to get in contact with these two wonderful people, they do have a website, as you saw, and they do have other areas of social media. There's their website address, Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, YouTube. It's all there. So we want to say thank you again for taking the time out of your positive, productive schedules. Oh, there's a comment here. Yes, true. Costs got to come down, but without adoption and demand, the costs will remain high for those who don't want to get behind the initiative.
Well said, Earl.
Yep.
Beautiful. Well, ladies, I'll let you do the rest of your day.
Thank you.
Especially it's a Monday. And keep on. You look great. You're looking great in orange, by the way.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right. Take care. Thanks again. Be well.
Thank you.
There we go. All right. So another great segment from the ladies of Foodpreneur Lab. Excellent. And I always learn so much, but this food preservation thing is really something. Again, after I had that conversation with a gentleman who lives beside me, works at the grocery store, it sort of became, I got to find out more about this stuff. So really good conversation. So again, Ryan is not feeling well today, but we're speaking, he's going to be back on Friday. So a few things to update you on. So Friday, coming up on this Friday's show, Wayne Harris will be talking about credit and debt management on Financial First Fridays on the Morning Vibe. And that's what I mean. Like, it just seems like we just had Wayne on a little while back. And it's just, wow, he comes on the first Friday each month. And he's already on again. So a few other things you can catch. Wrong thing there. Let me just do a few things. So let me just put it up here. I'm confused today. There we go. You can watch replays of the Morning Vibe at the Dr. Vibe Show on YouTube and Facebook, Afro-Caribbean Business Network, Facebook and YouTube, Ryan O'Neill Knight on YouTube, so you can catch us there. Would you like to promote your business or service on our show? Contact me at dr_vibe at the drvibeshow.com. I think that's a wrap today, folks. We are done. Told you what's coming up on Friday. And Dr. Tachi, yeah, you just caught us. No problem. You'll watch replay. And I've made a number of promises. I'm going to be reaching out to you to have you come on and talk about media, tech, and pop culture. So watch out for that video message in the next day or so. As always, I want to reach out by doing this. Yes, you'll watch a replay. Live your life as a dream. If you can dream it, you can make it. Sometimes you have to get small to get stronger. Block assumptions. Then aim bigger, aim better, aim higher, aim wider. Love, faith, and respect. And remember to give yourselves grace. Hope you have wherever you're watching this, hope you have an outstanding day. God bless. Peace well. Keep the faith. And we'll see you on Friday. Peace.